Morning, all. All right, so the 1943-1944 season. The Montreal Canadiens really take over that year. The Rangers bottom out. And so for Montreal, this is quite the season. They finished 38-5-7. Five losses in 50 games. So 234 goals scored, 109 goals against. And that's 83 points in a 50 game season. Detroit, a distant second. Still really good, though. 26-18-6 record for 58 points, 214 goals scored, 177 goals against. Toronto's 500 that year, 50 points, so 23-23-4 record, 214 goals scored, 174 goals allowed. Chicago Blackhawks, they have 49 points with a record of 22-23-5, 178 goals scored, 187 goals against. The Boston Bruins finish outside of the playoffs at 19-26-5, 43 points. 223 goals scored, 268 goals against. And the New York Rangers, as I said, just absolutely miserable season. 39-5, 17 points, 162 goals scored, 310 goals against. So that's a brutal goals against. 310 goals against in 50 games. So Herb Cain's the leading scorer in the NHL that year with 82 points in 48 games, 36 goals, 46 assists to get to those 82 points. And he sets an NHL high in points in a season. Doug Bentley, 50 games, 38 goals, 39 assists, 77 points, is second. Lauren Carr of Toronto, 50 games, 36 goals, 38 assists, 74 points. Carl Liscombe of the Detroit Red Wings, 50 games, 36 goals, 37 assists, 73 points. Elmer Locke of Montreal, 48 games, 24 goals, 48 assists, 72 points. Clint Smith of Chicago, 50 games, 23 goals, 49 assists, 72 points. Bill Cowley of Boston, 36 games, 30 goals, 41 assists, 71 points. So he misses 14 games and still ends up in the top scoring list. Bill Mosienko of Chicago, 50 games, 32 goals, 38 assists, 70 points. And your wins leader is easily rookie Bill Durnan, who finishes 38-5-7 at 2.18 goals against and two shutouts. Connie Dion of the Detroit Red Wings, 17-7-2, 3.08 goals against and one shutout. Bert Gardner of the Boston Bruins, 17-19-5, 5.17 goals against and one shutout. Paul Bebo for Toronto, 13-14-2, 3.09 goals against, 5 shutouts. And Mike Karakis of Chicago, 12-9-5, 3.04 goals against, and 3 shutouts. So what happens that season that allows for the scoring to blow up? They added the red line at center ice, and they were doing that to encourage offense and discourage offside. So prior to that, you couldn't forward pass, and now you can forward pass through every zone. The red line being added means you can pass right up until that red line, and it breaks through some of the defensive systems that are in place at the time. The Wings lost 9 players to military service, and the Rangers lost 5 more. So the Rangers, who were at the bottom yesterday and were a bad team, get worse, and significantly worse. So you'll notice Lynn Patrick isn't amongst the top scorers because he's left the league to join the military as well. Ken Tubby McCauley, and what a terrible nickname. I'm sorry, I don't know who named him Tubby, but that's not usually a compliment. And it stuck. He has a 6.20 goals against average for the Rangers. That is still an all-time high for a goaltender who plays more than 30 games in a season. I'm going to go out on a limb and say it will never be beaten. There will never be a goaltender in the NHL with a goals against average higher than 6.2 who plays more than 30 games in the National Hockey League in a season. So Canes 82 points, as I said, set a new NHL record. September 10th of 1943, Montreal trades Ted Kennedy to Toronto in exchange for Frank Edels. So that ends up being a pretty good trade for Toronto. Kennedy would be a huge star for them. October 30th of 1943, Gus Bodnar of the Leafs scores 15 seconds into the first shift of his career, which sets an NHL record at the time. 15 seconds into his career, he had a goal. December 4th of 1943, Her Habs rookie, Bill Durnan, sets a record with an unbeaten streak of 14 games, 12-0-2 in that time, with an 8-2 win against Detroit. So Montreal didn't just win games, they just destroyed the opposition, is how that worked. We'll talk about that when we talk about the playoffs, too. January 23rd of 1944, Detroit sets a record with 15 straight goals in a game against the New York Rangers in a 15-0 victory. So again, the very much undermanned New York Rangers. that's an embarrassing score. That's a tough one. And yeah, for a league that's trying to generate interest and revenue and having its struggles financially, I'm sure that didn't help attendance at MSG. January 8th of 1944, the Leafs' Babe Pratt sets a defenseman record with 6 assists in a game in a 12-3 win over Boston. So plenty of games with double-digit scores in that season. February 20th of 1944, Chicago goaltender Mike Kourakis at one end, Toronto goaltender Paul Bibeau at the other end. They played to the only scoreless draw in a penalty-free game in NHL history. I don't know if there'd been whiteboards and videos back then. I don't know how you'd review a game like that. I think you just stand in front of the camera and go, nobody scored and nobody took a penalty. Good night, everybody. Because yeah, there's really not much to report on there, is there? March 18th of 1944, the Habs finished the season 22-0-3 at home. They are the first team to go completely undefeated in a season at home. 50 game schedule, 25 of those at home, and they never lost a single game at home. And that'll probably generate a lot of interest in your team when you just don't lose. You're guaranteed to see them win. Or 3 times they tied. I wonder if they were disappointed with ties. We're getting into the era where Montreal fans really and truly are spoiled with some serious Stanley Cup wins and superstar after superstar. So the Hart Trophy goes to Babe Pratt of the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Calder goes to Gus Bodnar of the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Vezina, that goes to Bill Durnan of the Montreal Canadiens. Not a surprise there. The Lady Byng goes to Clint Smith of the Chicago Blackhawks. Your first and second team All-Stars around the NHL that year. At center, Bill Cowley is still the first-line center from Boston. Elmer Locke of Montreal, second-line center. Right wing, Lauren Carr of the Toronto Maple Leafs' first team. Your second team All-Star is Maurice Richard of the Montreal Canadiens. Left wing, Doug Bentley of Chicago's first team. Herb Kane of the Boston Bruins' second team. On defense, Babe Pratt of Toronto and Earl Siebert of Chicago are the first team All-Stars. Butch Bouchard of Montreal and Dit Clapper of Boston are your second team All-Stars. And in goal, Bill Durnan of Montreal is the first team All-Star. Paul Bibeau of Toronto is the second team All-Star. So we get to the playoffs, and again, it's best of 7. You have Toronto playing Montreal, Chicago playing Detroit. So it's still 1 versus 3, 2 versus 4. And I think it stays that way throughout the original 6 era. I don't know of it changing, but again, we'll go through this. I'll discover it at the same time you do. So at the semifinals, Toronto and Montreal, Toronto wins the first game 3-1, which may have been a bad idea because it clearly makes Montreal angry. Montreal sweeps the rest of it. 5-1 at home in game 2, and then they go into Toronto. They win 2-1 and 4-1 before coming home and winning 11-0. Yeah, 11-0 in game 5. So there's some serious no mercy there. Montreal wins that series in 5, of course. On the other side, Chicago and Detroit deciding who's going to get beat up by Montreal in the final. Chicago wins the first game 2-1. Detroit wins the second game to tie the series 4-1, and then Chicago wins the rest. They win 2-0 at home, 7-1 at home in game 4, and then in game 5 they go into Detroit and win 5-2 to win that series in 5. And then the Stanley Cup doesn't take that long at all. So these playoffs, they wanted to get them done. Montreal wins the first game at home 5-1. They win in Chicago in game 2 3-1, and in Chicago in game 3 3-2 before winning at home in overtime 5-4. So Chicago made it close, didn't win a game. It's a sweep for Montreal. It's the Stanley Cup. Toe Blake led playoff scoring that year, 9 games, 7 goals, 11 assists, 18 points. Maurice Richard, 9 games, 12 goals, 5 assists, 17 points. He's getting ready for a 50-goal season. Elmer Locke, 9 games, 2 goals, 11 assists, 13 points. And Bill Durnan had a goals against average in those playoffs of 1.53. So 2.18 during the regular season for Durnan, 1.53 in the playoffs. Montreal got better in the playoffs. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you have not done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.